children and also adults learn more about themselves and at each developmental stage, and also intertwine that with trauma and stuff like that too. So I thought I would start off by giving just a real brief overview of the inner child. So the inner child is it's the unconscious part of our mind where we carry all our unmet needs and suppressed childhood emotions. Could be creativity as well, and also kind of throwing a bit of trauma in that as well, that perhaps as a child, for whatever reason, there was a trauma that may have occurred, and let me reword that again. So it's the ability to I'm stumbling a bit tonight. I must be a bit nervous, so I apologize. Let me just take a breath. Sorry, I've done this before, but for whatever reason, I'm feeling a bit anxious. That's how I kind of come back to myself. So the inner child is, that suppressed creativity, and, not the ability of perhaps play has been also suppressed. Sorry, I've just lost my notes. The inner child, is forever within us. It's something that it doesn't, disappear or go away. It's always there. And we see the world through our lens of our inner child. As children, our core needs is to be seen, heard, and that allowing for us to express ourselves. We don't have the emotional maturity to process our emotions and experiences. So that's why we need, our parents or our caregivers to help us through those big, strong feelings and emotions. So that's kind of, a little bit of the overview of what the inner child is. Loretta, did you want to add anything to that about the inner child?
No, that all sounds actually amazing. And I think it's a really good thing to point out that we, just what you said there, we see our world through the lens of our inner child. Like, that is massive. When you said that, that was like, what? Like an attack. And I really felt that. And I think, I can see a few nods as well. And I think that was huge because coming back to, if you think about, our unmet needs, suppressed, unconscious part of our mind, the suppressed play, creativity, all those things that were suppressed as children. And now as adults, we're looking through the world with that particular with all of that really just, it makes so much more sense, right, when we can understand, okay, that's why I see things the way that they are, that's why I'm triggered by certain things. And it helps us really understand ourselves a little bit better. Also, I think it allows us to have a little bit more compassion for ourselves, right? Imagining that, hey, there's still this little child, this little girl inside me who, doesn't think she's good enough because of whatever happened to me when I was little, or, I wasn't able to, I'm not able to take time out to play or be creative in my day-to-day. So that's coming out in other ways in my life at the moment. So I love that. It's really, that's really huge, I think, just and really made me think about how we can be a little bit more compassionate for ourselves by acknowledging that this is how we're seeing the world, is through our inner child. You touched on trauma. Can you just talk to us a little bit more about trauma? Because obviously, you know, we're going to be talking about childhood stuff. So if anyone, I think it's important for us all to just acknowledge that we've all had different experiences. And if anyone, Hayley, I'd love for you just to talk about if anyone's feeling triggered tonight or after tonight, if they feel like something's being processed or not being processed. Can you just talk a little bit about how to support that and if they should as well, what they should or shouldn't do about that?
So yeah, it's really important that, you know, if tonight for whatever reason, like Loretta was saying earlier, about you have a aha moment, or that's where that comes from, and, you know, making that connection. Perhaps, you know, there was a little bit of trauma, or something that really, perhaps maybe as your adult self, you don't kind of, I guess, remember, but something within tonight, it might come flooding back, or you make that connection. It's really important. One, self-care. Be really gentle with yourself. You know, reach out to myself or to Loretta, or if you have someone that you already see, a counsellor or a coach of some sort that it's already maybe helping you through that. It's really important that you reach out and, you know, kind of talk it through. That's really important, because trauma can be, it can be huge. And trauma also isn't in a, you know, let's say, for example, the bushfires isn't in just an event like that. It could be that you were shamed for wearing boys' clothes when you were a child, you know. Trauma is quite broad, I guess, in a sense, and there's many different, I guess many people are, I guess, affected in certain ways. So what might be, you know, traumatic for yourself, or something that happened in your family, your sibling, or for myself, might not feel that as a traumatic experience. So it's something that rocks us to our core. It's something that just, for whatever reason, our minds and our bodies just can't handle that, or handle someone that said something to us. And trauma, it's an experience that stuns us, and it really overwhelms us. It rocks us to our core, leaving us altered and really, I suppose, disconnected from our bodies. And what's really important about trauma as well, it's not actually in the event itself. It resides in the nervous system. So I'm not sure, some of you may or may not have heard of The Body Keeps a Score, which is a really amazing book that I love. I can't think of the author right now, because there's so many that I am so in love with. But The Body Keeps a Score is a really an amazing book. Yes, thank you, Loretta. And another one is Peter Levine. He is just amazing. He works with the body, and he talks about that the body remembers. So talking about the nervous system, the trauma is actually within the body. So for example, I had a client who, for some reason, anyone around their neck or coming towards, he would tense up and be like, oh, don't come near me. And as we worked through that and, uncovered some things and, introducing a bit of body stuff, he came to the realization that his father was really abusive towards him, and he would grab him by the neck and throw him to the ground. So he made that realization that, it's even though he can't remember, logically, it's just automatic reaction that someone around his neck, he would tense up. So we worked through that, and once we were able to identify that was that, we obviously did a lot more work and a lot more body work. He was able to relax his body and know that he was safe, and that it wasn't that his dad was coming to sort of grab him. So that's a little bit of an example of the body or the nervous system remembering. And with therapy and working through that, you can, and it's not something that I also want to, I guess, talk about, that it's not something that happens straight away. You know, this person was in a therapy for quite a while, because, you know, this traumatic stuff, it takes a lot of courage to work with as well. So tonight, if you know, again, feel that you're having those aha moments and it's really confronting, please make sure that you get in contact with myself or Loretta, or, you know, if you have someone that you're already kind of working through that stuff with, because we want to make sure that you are feeling safe and that you're okay. That's paramount in, you know, this kind of work.
Hayley, Leslie's just asked, when you say body work, what is that? Can you just talk a little bit more about that?
So body work, I use sand play therapy and expressive therapy. So for example, I'm going to use, I guess, myself. When I was training in my sand play therapy, I have this almost like this purging where I'd get this really tightness in my throat, and I didn't know what it was. And when I was doing my training, because it was very experiential, my teacher would kind of gently prompt me or guide me in sitting with that and breathing into that and noticing the feeling. There was a color. It was just that for me to release stuff is I needed to scream and yell, and just went with what my body needed. So it needed to kick, it needed to punch, it needed to scream. So that's, you know, working with the mind and the body and connecting with the right side of the brain, which I will talk a little bit more tonight as well. You may have heard of somatic therapies, and that's really connecting with the body. So just being present with your body and just noticing what's, I guess, coming up. And again, this is something that takes a lot of work. It's not something that, you know, you're going to go have a first session and you go, oh, you know, I had this funny feeling in my tummy, and, you know, this is what we did. Again, this is really gentle work. And my training was, you know, almost a year. So this kind of work, and particularly those who have experienced trauma, because they don't feel safe, it's, again, really gentle work. And it's about finding someone that you can trust and connect with. So that's, I hope I explained that okay, about body work, but it's just, connecting and being, I guess, present with certain feelings that you feel within your body.
Body work can also, you know, we talked about energy healing as well, breath work as well, anything that really works through some of that. When you talk about the trauma actually staying within us, I mean, it stays on a deep cellular level, as we talked about. So any of that sort of work can help work through. And I love that you talked about trauma not having to be it doesn't have to be something as, you know, as traumatic as you know, as a father having his trying to strangle or choke, you know, his son, like that. It can be as simple as, you know, I was just working with a client this morning, and she was talking about how her brother used to tell her that she wasn't good at stuff, so she wasn't allowed to play with him. And that for her has been traumatic, because it basically has, in her entire life, she's spent believing that she wasn't good enough. So, you know, that's just enough to be trauma. It's like Hayley said, it's what rocks you to your core. So let's get into going through the chakras now. And what we're going to do is we're going to focus on the 7 main chakras. So the chakra system is basically our it's what our energy system is based around, essentially. So each chakra is located within our body from the base of our spine to the top of our crown, and there are 7. And many of you already know about the chakras, but each one actually governs an area of us mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically. So, and each one develops in different times in our life. It's not to say that these are just guides, obviously. It's not to say these things can't be developed or impacted throughout other times in our life, but, and they continuously keep developing as well once they reach their fruition. So I'm going to go through the development, and then, that's okay. And then Hayley's also going to talk about it from the more clinical, I guess, perspective, the more kind of Western philosophy. So we start off with the root chakra. And the root chakra begins development in the womb until like the first year of our life. So our root chakra is basically, so it's located at the base of our spine, and it's really our center of security, stability, safety, connecting us to the physical world. And if you think about what's happening in our development as a baby, so, think back if you've had a baby, or any babies, or even, just the concept of a baby, the first thing that they need is their survival needs have to be met, right? So they need food, and they need shelter, and they need to be attached to a caregiver as well, to feel safe and to feel secure as well. So that is basically what is developing in that first year of life. So if you think about anything that might happen in that first year of life that is going to, that may be happening to the child, or may even happen to the mother while she's carrying the child in her womb, if her sense of stability is rocked, let's say, for example, or security or safety, let's even just use the current climate, right? Like, there's a lot of fear going around at the moment. Think about all the pregnant women, and if someone was particularly affected, let's say someone's pregnant, their partner loses their job, they have to now leave their current home, they are trying to look for a new house while she's pregnant. That's going to have an effect on the child, because the mother, her sense of security and stability is all shaken, and so that is also going to have an effect, an impact on the child's development as well. Hayley, can you add to that in terms of what is happening to a child in that first year of life? And I guess from that, that development perspective as well.
And I just want to touch on what you were talking about, about the example you gave of, someone who's pregnant now and losing their job and the stress like that. That also can be traumatic. So what we know, and it's been, I guess, scientifically proven, that trauma can actually affect the baby inside you, like when you're pregnant as well. So I like that you were talking about that, someone losing their job and all the stress and stuff like that, because that can actually play an effect on the child as well. I'm just reading that comment regards to, yes, I'm going to talk a little bit about that question that's just been asked about being born premature. It can have an effect in regards to the chakras. Would you agree, Loretta, that when, sorry, I'm going to stop because I got distracted by that question. And you want me to talk about at that stage. So sorry, guys. Sorry. So yeah, at that age, that's pre-birth to around 8 months. That's when the brain stems or the reptilian brain or the reptile brain is the first part of the brain to develop. So, and that's just the basic function, such as heart rate, breathing, and regulating body temperature. And that's the first part of the brain that's developed. Did that kind of answer the question, Loretta? Is that what you're after? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess if you explain what the reptilian brain is and its function for us, but I think it's to do with the survival instincts, isn't it?
It's your acting instinctively, and making those split-second decisions. That's survival. It's protecting you, I guess, and making sure that you're safe, I guess, and which is what you're talking about with that chakra, the base chakra.
Yeah, and in terms of the question, please feel free to answer them. That's all right. I was just thinking, absolutely. It depends, I guess, when you talk about premature. There's obviously premature. Had to stay in hospital, it was touch and go, there's that kind of premature, and then there's premature, was born a bit early but no complications, everything was fine, and mum and bub were attached and everything was fine, and they went home and all good to go. But if someone was born prematurely and there was that real sense of far out, they might not actually make it, you can just imagine what kind of impact how life begins for that child, but also how it begins also for the parents, right? And the impact that has on a child as well. That child comes out fighting already. They're like fight or flight, freeze mode straight away. So it is, it's very hard to get out of that, right? And they have to really work, not to say that they can't, but they would need to really feel safe and secure, stable. Those things are really important anyway for a baby, but also even more so for a premature child. Did you want to add to that?
I just missed that, sorry.
Did you want to add to that as well, in terms of like the effect that on the premature baby?
I just kind of linked it back to a little bit about trauma, because that can be quite traumatic, and particularly the mother and the baby's connection is paramount. And in those situations, it is, when children are premature, it is really hard because they go into an incubator and, all that kind of stuff. And they're sort of, I guess, in a way detached. So that can be actually traumatic. And that can, as a child gets older, it could be really unsettled, and have, just be real unsettled as a baby, because they're kind of missing that connection for example, I know I have a client whose her first child was premature. I can't remember how many weeks premature, but as he's, I think, about 3 now, and she's had some real difficulties with, in terms of, being quite hyper aroused. So in that fight, like you're saying, they're born ready to fight. So he's in this, and when I was mentioned before about trauma and about how it's in the nervous system, so I've given her some tips and tools to help him kind of calm that nervous system. Hope that made sense.
Yeah, that's awesome. Good. Please keep the questions coming as well as we go through. So the next one is the sacral chakra. So this is chakra number 2, and this is basically located at the the navel, so that just below the navel area within our body. And this is really our center of emotions when we're developing as children, creativity, our passions, things that we love doing, and enjoyment, and also our body. So think about what's happening after about that 1-year-old mark. So think about around 18 months, 2 years old, 2.5, around that particular age group. This is when children are learning to really deal with their emotions, and they start really feeling big emotions. And this is the time of, terrible twos and temper tantrums and all of that kind of stuff. So it's very important for caregivers to be able to help regulate the children and their emotions and how they're feeling, but also to validate that what they are feeling is valid, that it's okay to be feeling the way that they are feeling. So think about and the way that they express those emotions. So, for example, if a child is told to stop crying, stop screaming, stop being angry, stop this, stop that. If you're constantly, being dismissed for how you feel, then the child quickly learns that feeling like a certain way is not okay. But also they learn that showing emotion in a certain way is not okay as well. So it's a real tricky one for parents to try not to, have an impact on the child by teaching them how to regulate their emotion in a way that is, of course, safe for them and for others around them, but also wanting them to develop a healthy relationship with their emotions as well. And also just being allowed to play, being allowed to touch their body and be curious about their body and things like that. So once you can see how we've developed from survival mode, our needs are okay, the foundations are all set, and now we're growing up, right? And we're starting to move, the focus is more on us and that self-centeredness, like the world revolves around me and my emotions and who I am, and that's where that's really the next stage in our development. Hayley, do you have anything to add around that age?
Yeah, I think I might. I'm going to talk a little bit about the brain. Some of you may or may not know that our brain is actually divided into, I guess, two sides. So the left side and the right side of the brain. And not only are these two parts of the brain, I guess, separate, they function really differently. So the left brain loves order. It's that logical thinking part of the brain. And is just very, I guess, logical. Whereas the right side of the brain is that holistic, non-verbal, and sending and receiving messages or signals that allow us to communicate. So, for example, facial expressions, your non-verbal signs, tone of voice, posture, gestures, all that kind of stuff. And instead of detail, like the left side of the brain, the right side cares about the bigger picture. And that's where what Loretta was talking about the feelings and emotions, that's that part of the brain, it's the right side. And when we get that gut feeling or that heartfelt sense, that's from our right side of the brain. And it's more that, I guess, the intuitive and emotional side of the brain. And in terms of, we're talking a little bit about development, young children are right side dominant. So usually during the first 3 years, they haven't quite mastered the ability to use logic and words to express their feelings. They literally just live in the moment. And you'll start to see when toddlers, having the tantrums, that's the emotional part of the brain. That's really, really starting to develop and grow. Yes, the thinking part of the brain, or the left side, where the thinking part of the brain it's developing, it's there, but it's really immature. So when a toddler starts to ask questions, the why questions, why are you doing that? Why can't I have this? Why? That's when you know that the left side of the brain is starting to really kick in, because the left side likes to know, I guess, the linear cause and effective relationships in the world. And it's just all about expressing and using language. So what that chakra, the sacral that you're talking about, is when you start to really notice that emotional part, like you said, the tantrums and stuff. That's because that part of the brain, it kind of develops in, I guess, it actually develops from the bottom up. And that's where that's called the limbic system, the emotional center part of the brain. And at that age, and particularly at that chakra, it is going through a really rapid development. And like you said, it can be that irrational behavior, the lovely tantrums that we might experience or see children in the supermarkets going, no, I want that chocolate. So that's that part of the brain that's really, I guess, thriving. Sorry.
Awesome. No, that's really great. I'm glad these are aligning so far. So the solar plexus is next. So we've talked about our survival needs being met, our emotional coming back to really more of the focus on who we are. Then we move up. So around the 3-4-year-old mark, what's happening is this is when we're actually starting to really develop our sense of identity and who we are. So the child no longer really sees themselves as an extension of their caregiver, their primary caregiver. Also, predominantly it's usually the mother. And they start to realize that they're actually a separate being, so they're independent. So they will start to try to get away with things like saying, no, I don't like that, or I do like that, or I don't want to play with that, or making their own decisions and coming into their own, if you like. So this is really our center of identity, our center of confidence, our center of also where we get our where we take action from. And the reason why it's so important at this age that we allow, and that we have been allowed to when we're around this age, to express who we are, the reason that is so important, and for our caregivers to allow us that space to express ourselves and not feel ashamed of who we are, it's really important, because otherwise we tend to grow up and are forever looking at outside of ourselves for validation about who we should be and what we should be doing, rather than really understanding that we need to be in the driver's seat of that, and we need to take our power back and be in power about, in that, in making our own decisions and knowing what's right for us and wrong for us and things like that. If the child feels ashamed, Hayley used the example about maybe wearing boys' clothes, or the boy wearing the tutu maybe, or, that sort of thing, or wearing, not wanting to wear dresses, a girl who wants to wear pants all the time, whatever it might be, or not liking her broccoli, or, all of these sorts of things, just making their own decisions about things, even not wanting to give someone a hug, right? Like a grandparent or an uncle or something, or an auntie, that sort of thing. It's about making those choices and feeling empowered to make those own choices by ourselves. So it's a real pivotal age for that. It's also tends to be the age where, if these things haven't been nurtured, the age where people pleasing starts to develop, because we think that we have to be a certain way, act a certain way in order to, please our caregiver. And this behaviour starts with the caregiver, but it then turns, and we'll talk about as we move up throughout adolescence and adulthood, but then that particular person turns into trying to please our friends, trying to please the teacher, trying to please, work colleagues or whatever, or our boss, or, whatever it might be in our relationships. So that's where that sort of stuff comes into it. So solar plexus, definitely all located just below the ribs as well. So again, also on that area of that gut instinct, knowing what's right, what's wrong as well. So Hayley, interested to hear your take on that age group.
Yeah, I'm going to kind of go off a little bit and talk more about the brain, because I think, as I guess science and, as we've evolved, we've learned more about the brain and how it works. And I think this is really paramount, for ourselves, but also if you have children as well, to help, as we're talking about the inner child, to make sure that we are helping our children when they are having those big, strong feelings, and helping them have that sense of identity. So yeah, I'm just going to talk a little bit about the brain again, and imagine that your brain it's like a house, with both a downstairs and an upstairs. So the downstairs brain, that includes the brainstem and the limbic region, which are the lower parts of your brain. From I think it goes from like a bottom of our neck to kind of the bridge of our nose. And that is the part of the brain that's really responsible for the basic function, like breathing and blinking and reactions, which we kind of touched on before. And your upstairs brain it's actually completely different. So it's made up of the frontal lobe, which is that thinking brain, and all other parts of that are kind of in that, like the cortex. And I spoke about the thinking brain before, and its various parts. The upstairs brain is more, I guess, involved and can give you a full perspective of your own world. And that's all where the thinking and imagination and planning take place, is actually in the upstairs brain. And it's really highly, I guess, sophisticated. And it's controlling some of the most important higher order and that analytical thinking. So yeah, I just kind of wanted to just give a real overview of, the different parts of the brain, and, in kind of intertwine with what Loretta's talking about with the chakra systems and at what age. So the brain develops from the bottom up, and the first, I guess, two parts of the brain that develop are the brainstem and the limbic system, which is the emotional center. And then as, we get older, and as our children get older, that's when the frontal cortex starts to really, I guess, come on, and what Loretta was talking about before, that sense of identity. So understanding a little bit about their world or your world.
Yeah, cool. Thank you. That's awesome. So does I'm assuming the thinking brain starts to develop around this, like, 4-year-old. They're starting to make their own decisions and know what they want to do, and yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, cool.
And that doesn't mean that they know how they're feeling or whatever. It's, our job as parents, caregivers, educators to help them with that language, so they can understand more about how they're feeling and what, I guess, is triggering them into feeling that way, and giving them some language around that.
Yeah, right. That's really cool. Next, we have the heart chakra, so obviously located where the heart is, in our chest area. And this is really our center of love, as most people would assume it would be, but it's also our center of relationships and actually learning on how we relate with other people. So for example, so this starts to develop around that 4 or 5 year old mark. And what is happening around that age is we actually start to see how people interact with each other and what's appropriate and what's not. And you'll find that children, what they start to doing is, as I mentioned in solar plexus, they start deciding and the things that they like, but also they start deciding who they want to play with. So originally, the parents decide who they have play dates with, and then as they kind of get through preschool and their first year at school, they're sort of starting to make up their mind about who they actually get along with and who they vibe with and who they don't, and trying to find their place in the dynamics of relationships with different people. So for example, you'll notice that maybe some children are shy or a bit more timid when they're around other certain people, and then they're all they're a totally different sort of child when they're around people that they know and stuff like that. Or sometimes they show more leadership sort of skills or styles, and then when they're around different sorts of people, they might be more of the follower or depending on the dynamic. But that is sort of what is happening around that age. And what is also happening is the way that we see our primary caregivers and their relationship with one another. So think about if you had one of your caregivers leave at that particular time of your life, that really sets the scene, or their relationship wasn't great, that really sets the scene for kind of your aspect and your the way that you see core relationships in your life as well. So a lot of things like lack of trust, don't want to get too close to people, I'm not good enough because that person will reject those people rejected me. And it's when we start to develop these sorts of beliefs and limiting beliefs. And just on that as well, I think it's important to say that none of this is the fault of our caregivers. I mean, it absolutely isn't, because they don't really consciously, most of them don't consciously know what the effect is they're having on us. And even if even if they do consciously know and they try to be, they're a bit more aware and conscious and they're trying to be the best parent that they possibly can be, they cannot control. And I'd love to hear your how you talk about this, Hayley, but they cannot control the child's story that they end up creating because of a certain aspect or because of a certain situation. The child is trying to understand things in their own way. So they form these sometimes ridiculous stories in their head, like, I'm not good enough. And it absolutely isn't the case, but it's their child's way of, I guess, protecting themselves or, trying to make sense of a situation. Oh, it must be because of me, those sorts of things. So really this is what's happening at that, around those ages. Can you talk a little bit more?
Say that again.
Oh, could you talk a little bit more about how, it's I guess why as children we sort of make up these limiting beliefs that we carry through for the rest of our lives?
Yeah, and I guess a perfect example is that their brains aren't fully developed. That logical thinking, reasoning part of the brain, which is your frontal cortex or your frontal lobe. So they're kind of only getting that emotional part of it. Oh, that's how I felt when, dad left or mum left. So, and this is why I love, I guess, talking more about the brain, is because where it obviously the brain is so complex, and I'm no brain surgeon, and there's so much to learn, but particularly with children and their growing minds, it's really important to acknowledge that feeling, or talk to them. Let's use the example of mum or dad leaving, or whatever it may be. So, and that the reason why I was talking about the left and the right brain as well is because we want to integrate the two, because they do work, or the upstairs and the downstairs brain. We want to integrate them, and how you do that is by so for example, what age were we talking about with the heart chakra, just so I can 4, yeah. So around that age, we want to, because the children don't have the language, so that you're talking about making their own stories. So we want to help them with that and give them language, because that frontal lobe is immature. So as the caregivers and adults, it's about communicating that, that must have been really hard. That must have made you feel like your dad didn't love you. So, and then incorporating, retelling the story, but having their input as well. So that could be through, drawing or creating a story. So because the brain is still developing, and children, you will find, will ask you questions. Well, why did that happen? And they'll keep asking that repetitive, because they're trying to make sense of it. And that's got to do with the frontal cortex, is making that, or I guess, I suppose, understanding why dad has left. And you'll find at different ages, perhaps, you're talking about the age of 4, when they are, say, 10 or 11, their thinking is more concrete, so they understand, because that brain, that frontal cortex, is growing and becoming, I guess, stronger. Does that make sense? Is that, yeah? Okay.
Yeah, and that's actually a really good segue to the throat chakra, which is located obviously in our throat, and this is really our center of truth and expression, and where we start to really develop, you were talking about that that analytical, the analytical brain, and and that really starts to take shape around that 7-year-old kind of mark. And the reason that is so important is that's when the throat chakra begins to develop, and this is when the child is actually able to express their truth. Right? So they're actually able to form words and communicate that I feel like this, or I've seen this, this, and this, and now I'm making this is the decision I've made based on these things. So for a really good example, Hayley, I'm just totally making this up, but can you tell me if this would be right based on the facts? This would be the kind of age you would feel more comfortable with allowing a child to cross the road by themselves, because they would be able to analytically really be able to make that decision about, right, no, there's no cars coming there, there's no cars coming there. That means, yes, I can cross the road. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, and I guess it just dependent on the parent, and perhaps, and I guess the other thing as well, we have these stages of development, but it's also, or their chronological age. So perhaps, because some children can be a little bit more, I guess, immature. So it is dependent on the child. So I can't really feel that I can give the yes or no answer. But I would suspect that, yes, they'll have more of that idea of, okay, I need to look left, I need to look right, because that part of the brain is starting to really thrive, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Obviously these are all guides. But yeah, I would, around that kind of age, they're sort of able to make their own decisions about exactly what is going on, and that becomes their truth. Right. And so I think, you're talking about when they start asking why, and that starts early, but it's around that age of the throat, when throat chakra development, around this, 7-year-old sort of age group, the 6-7-year-olds, if they get shut down for having an opinion, for example, about how they feel about something, about what they think about something, and they are getting shut down about that, you know, I guess the old phrase of, you know, children should be seen and not heard. And if that was really carried out in a household, then wow, you can imagine that that's going to have massive effects long term on a child wanting to speak up. I also have seen other ways that this has affected, you know, I had a client who was always told that she was shy, always, oh, you know, Mary's shy. Her mum would always tell everybody, Mary's shy, and so the first thing she said to me in our first session together was, oh, I'm really shy. And I just thought, oh my God, are you actually shy? Because the week before I had seen her presenting to people, and it made me laugh, because she had grown up with this being told that she was shy. She's actually not shy, but she just believed it. She'd been conditioned to actually believe it. And so you know, because of that, she had, you know, absolutely issues with voicing and expressing her real truth and living in her truth, because she didn't feel comfortable and confident enough, because she was always told that, yeah, she was shy, that you know, that truth wasn't worth expressing. So that's really, I think that, you know, that's a really good example of how we don't necessarily have to be told or not encouraged to speak, but even saying things, you know, having little comments made about us. I'm just going to read this comment. Do you move through the different chakras at different stages? Can you have symptoms showing up? Yeah, absolutely. So obviously we're talking about child development, and the reason we're talking about that is because we start to, I mean, this is when the inner child is being developed, right? So this is when that unconscious mind starts to develop, but you absolutely continue on developing through the chakras, and at different times in your life. I mean, we talked about the root chakra in the womb to the first year of life, but if you lost your job tomorrow as a, you know, 40-year-old, that's still going to have an impact on your root chakra, absolutely. But depending on what was happening in your development stage, that is going to, you know, that's either going to affect the way that you handle the situation, or also, you know, that inner sense that you are safe and secure, and that things outside of you aren't going to help really determine that. But that is the throat. That is the throat chakra, and it's also really important for us to develop our throat in a way where you, you know, are able to express yourself fully and wholly. Because if you aren't able to do that, then you're also unable to live in your true authentic self, and you're, you know, feeling comfortable and confident enough to live authentically in your absolute truth. And that starts with being validated that our truth is our truth, and it's okay, and that that it is valued as well. So Hayley, did you have anything to add to that as well?
No, I think you did that beautifully. Yeah.
Thank you. All right, so the next part of our development is the third eye. So we skip a few years here, and this actually doesn't start developing until we hit those first years of puberty, so around that 13-year-old mark. And I'm interested to hear what's happening around the brain at this time too, Hayley. But with the third eye, this is really, most of us really, you know, understand it as a center of intuition and you know, foresight and clairvoyance and all that sort of stuff. But it is actually more than that. It is much, much more than that. Our third eye is obviously our center of perception of the world around us, our reality, and also our reality of ourself as well. So it really is important. The third eye development is important in us developing our self-image. And think about what's happening for people, you know, for teenagers. I mean, this is all about self-image, right? Like that's what they're forming in those first those years in that high school age bracket. So it is, again, this comes down to them being validated, that and really caregivers giving them what they need to help form real positive images about who they are, and also their reality about how things are. I see it's so common. It is so common for me, you know, when I'm working with clients, and I can see that their third eye is blocked because they cannot see their true potential, and that is very common. Is very common, and I really believe that this happens, you know, it starts to happen when we're younger, and all of this, you know, not being validated, obviously, and not feeling good enough, not feeling all of these things that we've been talking about, and then to get to a point where, if you can imagine that, if you're not being validated for who you are and what you are, and your beliefs and your values and your truth and all that sort of stuff, by the time you hit that teenage year, those teenage years, you don't think that you're that, you know, physically maybe you don't measure up, and you also don't measure up academically or compared to, you know, even in the sporting field, or, you know, in all areas of your life, you start to really think that you really start to doubt your own image, and you see the world in a really different kind of, in a way that I don't believe is your truth, not at all. I'm just going to answer this question quickly. In the healing process, do you focus on each chakra individually, or do you heal holistically? Well, really, I mean, that would be up to you, but I always think there's very, very little chance that you only have one chakra to heal. And so I would say it's best just to, and even if you think you know which one needs to be healed, it's usually not the right one. There's usually things that are also going on and that have been affected as well. So I think that it's good to do always to tackle these things holistically and at all levels as well. Hayley, did you have anything to add? I'd love to understand what's happening from more on a perspective in those teenage years.
Yeah. Oh no, teenage years can be challenging, and that is because they're really going through this push and pull of wanting to, what's the word I'm looking for? I can't think of the word. To be, I guess, you know, they still want mum and dad or their carers kind of there, but their world is around their friends. So they're really moving into this, well, I'm becoming an adult and I'm going to make my decisions. I don't really need you, mum and dad, or whoever's the caregivers. So it's really, they're in that real, that thinking part of the brain is really starting to mature. And just so you know, that actually part of that thinking part of the brain isn't fully developed until the age of, I think it's around 25. Yeah, but at that teenage stage, it's they're kind of really separating from their parents emotionally, but still kind of wanting them there when they feel they need them. And it's that real sense of gaining that sense of identity, and that individual control, and making decisions for themselves. Yeah, that was kind of it.
No, that's awesome. Thank you. And that brings us to our the seventh chakra, which is the crown, located at the top of our head. So our third eye is obviously the center of our forehead. So the crown chakra is really our spiritual connection, right? It is our connection to, and it is almost like the bridge between our physical and the divine, or the spirit world, which is really doesn't start to develop until kind of leaving school age, so around the 18-year-old mark. And what is happening here is it's also our connection to our soul purpose. So it makes complete sense that when we are leaving school, we start to think about what the hell am I going to do with my life? And who am I? And, you know, we start to ask those questions usually once school is over, right? We realize that we're not this particular person we thought we were in high school, and suddenly our friends don't always seem like they are really our friends anymore, and we're looking at outside of ourselves, at you know, outside of the school for to create new friendships and things like that. So it's also, I mean, the crown chakra is also our center of learning and knowledge as well. So it's really about remaining open, and you know, I would say that if we're encouraged to continue learning and always continue learning, even when we reach that age, I think you're in good stead to always be open to learning. You know what I mean? It's like really understanding that that we never stop learning or growing, and that just because when you hit adulthood that you're done, you finished growing. And also, of course, that, you know, connecting us to our soul purpose, that does not by any means end around that age either. And it's also most significant around the 33-year-old mark, actually. We start to, it seems to be like a real mean age of when we really start to connect with our soul purpose and really understand and question who we really, really are, and question our spirituality, our spiritual connection, and our place in the world as a spiritual being. So, you know, that's kind of when we start maybe developing spiritual practices, or coming back to, you know, a lot of us tend to come back to things that we maybe dabbled in when we were younger and stuff like that. I know that was certainly true for me. I started Nourish Energy when I was 33, so just a little fun fact there. But it's so the crown is really the I guess that's really setting us up for continuously learning and connecting and growing as well. Hayley, you mentioned that the I guess the brain doesn't really stop forming at all until 25, and so I guess what's happening in those later years between, you know, 18 to 25?
Yeah. Well, little fun fact about the brain. Well, I find it really fascinating. Our brains are actually moldable. So what that means is that our brain is always physically changing throughout our lives. So it's not that, you know, we work at you know, this age and that age, blah blah blah. It's moldable. It's changing, and you're talking about the age of 30, 33, and I can really relate to what you were saying about you know, you created Nourished Energy, and, you know, went on, I guess, this little transformative period of your life, and I can really relate to that, because I know when I hit 30, it was like the floodgates opened. You know, I went on this massive healing journey, and I guess, you know, talking about the brain being moldable, and if you think about it, that it's always physically changing, the more we do this inner work, you know, connecting with the inner child and going on this healing journey, and you know, thinking about from the brain sense that I'm not sure if you heard the word, but neural pathways are strengthening and growing. So with doing this work and incorporating, you know, I guess the Western and the holistic kind of stuff, it's quite amazing, I think. Yeah,
it's really, really fascinating. Also, it's also really, really fascinating that as you said, the brain is always changing. We always have the ability to change these belief systems that we formed, these fears, these, all the things that I guess the inner child is feeling, and we have time to repair that. We always have time to repair that. It's not like the chakras stop developing, the brain stops developing, we stop developing. It's continuously, our cells are regenerating every day, right? So we're constantly a new person, quite literally. So we really have that power to do that work. Does anyone have any questions before we wrap up? But we'd love to invite you all back for a second part, because we felt like tonight was a really good opportunity for you guys to kind of deep dive and do, get some awareness about your own chakra development and your brain, what was going on during your childhood, and how you can apply that, I guess, to your healing and what needs to be healed. Trying to join some dots through the patterns of how you're living your life now, some of your limitations or fears, or, and all of that sort of stuff. I guess the unwanted behaviors, thoughts, feelings that might show up in your day-to-day life. But it's really nice to do the awareness piece, and then we'll look at coming back in another month and doing the we'd like to work with you guys and take you through giving you guys some tips and stuff on how, and tools on how to actually do some more inner child healing work once you've got the awareness there. Yeah. So if you've got any questions, we've got a couple more minutes if you'd like to ask a question.
And just going to add to part 2 about, I guess, learning how to meet your own needs as an adult, because I think that's really important. So for whatever reason you felt some needs or some things weren't met when you were a child, but it's now you are the parent of your own inner child. So giving out yourselves what you needed when you were a child. There's lots, and it's amazing work as well. I just want to kind of throw that in there. So it's about, I guess, reparenting yourself.
There's just a couple of questions. So firstly, thank you. That's really beautiful feedback. Thank you. And why do we revert back? This is a good one, actually. Hayley, I'm going to give you this one. Why do we revert back to inner child at various stages of our adult life? I guess this, is about why at certain times in our life we're triggered by. And I love that. That's, I'd love if you want to start with that one.
Yeah, well, I'm just having a look. I just want to see it. So I guess the reason why at certain parts of our life that we're kind of triggered by stuff is growing more awareness, and we're becoming more consciously aware of that particular moment. I'm trying to think of an example. Can't think of one off the top of my head.
I've got an example for you. So let's say you've got a fear of abandonment or rejection. Okay. Yeah. And let's say you've kind of gone through life and that's sort, you haven't really had the awareness that you've been like that, but in your relationships you found that that you're a little bit manipulative, maybe trying not to get your partner to leave you, but not really fully aware that you're doing that sort of stuff. And then you get to a point where you are in a relationship and they actually leave, and that when that happens, that brings up a great deal of you just cannot get over it, and you just don't understand why, and it's brought up so much so much grief, so much pain, and all that sort of stuff, and you are feeling more triggered than you feel like you should have been. You know, maybe the relationship wasn't that great anyway or whatever. That's a real good example of how, why now? You know, why now? And I would say, yes, the awareness, because if you are starting to do more work, then just as a result, the gift of doing more work is that you get more work to do. But the other thing is, I believe these things happen for us when we're ready as well. When, you know, on a soul level, we're actually ready to move through these things, because we're ready to make space, and those things just aren't serving us anymore. Those old thought patterns, old behaviors, fear, you know, they're just not serving us anymore. And in fact, they're just really not protecting us the way that they used to anymore. They're just holding us back from really stepping into a world, a life that we really know that we're worthy of and deserve. So I think that's kind of my take on it. Hayley, did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, and I guess it's that, you know, if it keeps, I guess, coming up at different stages, it's about you as an adult, yourself, is about reparenting and getting, and I guess finding what it is that inner child needs. Because for whatever reason, it is perhaps coming up in different aspects of your life. So you, as your adult self, it's about connecting with that inner child, going, okay, what are you trying to tell me? What is it that I need to give to you so that you feel okay or safe in that situation? Yeah.
So powerful. Like, how beautiful is that it doesn't matter, you know, what our childhood was like, but we have this second chance. You know, we have a chance to actually reparent and kind of fix all, you know, the damage done and actually renew. And that is so empowering. That is really, really empowering. And I think it doesn't matter how you know, how broken you might feel or whatever, there's absolutely opportunity and chance to really do the work on yourself, and not to move past feeling victim of your circumstance or you know, what you endured or what happened and all that sort of stuff, because we've all got a story. We've all had some kind of trauma in our childhood, and our inner child is there for all of us. You know, we've all got something that we're holding on to. And I can tell you, I've worked with hundreds and hundreds of people, and honestly, most of our suffering is really from ourselves, and but we totally have the power to change it, which is so beautiful. So beautiful. And that's why, if you're feeling like, I know it is so hard, Louise just wrote that, you know, it makes sense, but it is so hard sometimes. It is so hard. It is so hard.
And I think the thing is, we expect healing to be a straight line, but let me tell you, it's like, ooh, it's not linear. This work is hard, but as you kind of move through and make, I guess, more awareness and go through that hard stuff, it kind of, in a sense, gets easier. There's always going to be stuff, but it does get a little bit easier. And it's really important that, you know, practicing self-care and reaching out to someone who can help you work through that stuff too.
Yeah, it's important to remember we're not alone on this, right? We've all got something, and you're not separate, and you're certainly not alone on your journey. So very important to reach out if you feel like you need to. Yeah, Becky, it is really, really hard, but it starts to really make sense. And the more that you do this work, the more that it gets, like Hayley said, it gets easier. Your awareness deepens, the aha moments become more frequent, and it certainly becomes easier to really work through. And that inner child, you're quicker to nurture her, you know, that's and listen to her, which is really, really important, and to have compassion and love towards her as well.
Yeah.
So thank you everyone for coming along tonight. The session is recorded, so I will be sending it out to you all in case you want to look back again, or and also for people who have missed it and who wanted to watch it later on. But yeah, I will make sure we email all of you with to register for the second one. But in the meantime, take care and please be gentle with yourselves. You're all so, so worthy, and so is your inner child. Mwah.
Thank you. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you, girls.
Thank you.
Thank you.